Hey guys, welcome to my channel Miss Recap. When he was a kitten, Garfield was abandoned by his father in a wooden crate. With the promise that he would come back for him soon, Vic disappeared into the darkness, but several hours passed and he didn't return. Hungry after braving a heavy storm, the little guy smelled the delicious aroma coming from a pizzeria and decided to go there. As he approached the window of the establishment, Garfield came across John, who was lamenting the fact that he was alone, as all the people around him were in the company of their families. Enchanted by the cuteness of the kitten, John decided to open the window and feed him. The problem began when, after eating an entire pizza, the little guy ran over to the other customers' tables and devoured all the food he could find. Realizing his mistake, John took advantage of the fact that all the customers were absent-mindedly singing happy birthday to a birthday girl and went after the feline. Ever since he was young, Garfield has been very clever and has always managed to get away with his tricks. This time, it was no different, as John used the lasagna as bait to lure him in and he left the restaurant unnoticed. But instead of getting angry with the cat, the man enjoyed his company and decided to take him home. Since then, they have never separated and have even adopted another member to join the family. Over time, Garfield managed to turn Odie into his ally and the dog began to help him steal John's food. The years passed and, little by little, Garfield established himself as king of the house and began to look after John to repay all the love and affection his owner had lavished on him. That night, while John is resting up for another day's work, Garfield wakes Odie up so that the dog can help him prepare a snack. While the pets are deciding what to eat, two intruders break into the house and the pair end up being captured. After the attack, the two dogs take their victims to an abandoned house. Garfield and Odie are then tied to the roof. After a few minutes trapped upside down, the feline begins to hallucinate and thinks he is delirious when he sees a shadow approaching him. However, when he hears a voice trying to communicate, Garfield is sure that the silhouette is not a figment of his mind. Apparently, that person is there to help them escape and swings the rope so that the pair can land safely on the second floor. When the pair reach the ground, the hooded creature approaches and asks them to follow it. However, when he hears that voice, Garfield immediately recognizes it and removes the hood Vic was wearing to hide himself. The feline immediately realizes that he has been rescued by his father and is furious to see him, as he remembers very well the day he was abandoned by him. While father and son argue, a frightening noise echoes in the mansion and suddenly Jinx appears. When he sees her, Vic is embarrassed and tries to feign naturalness, but he knows that Jinx harbors deep resentment for something that happened between the two of them in the past. At this point, Garfield takes the opportunity to ask why the cat sent her henchmen to capture them and Jinx decides to tell her sad story. The feline reveals that she was born in a small town on the outskirts of London, but her dream was to live in the big city. In order to achieve this, Jinx went through many difficulties, but finally managed to get to London and found an opportunity to showcase her talent. However, seeing all the people watching her in the audience, Jinx panicked and was unable to perform. After that, she lived on the streets until the day she met Vic and his gang. When she was recruited to become part of that family, Jinx and her new friends planned a major farm robbery. After stealing countless bottles of milk, the gang of cats fled, but Jinx ended up being left behind and was captured by the Pound. When she arrived at the animal shelter, she was put in a cell with several other cats and there she lived the most terrible days of her life. Determined to get out of that disgusting place, she decided to make allies and, with the help of Roland and Nolan, managed to escape from the shelter. Since the day she escaped, Jinx can only think of one thing: revenge. However, as she couldn't find Vic anywhere, the solution was to capture his son to force him to appear. On hearing this story, Garfield asks how the cat intends to get revenge and Jinx says that Vic will have to pay for a liter of milk for every day she has been locked up. The problem is that the cat has been in the shelter for almost 5 years, which means that Vic will have to pay for 1,675 liters of milk for her. Not knowing where to get so much milk, Vic wonders how he will pay off this debt and Jinx suggests that he return to the farm where it all began. In addition, Garfield and Odie will have to accompany him and, if they don't return with the payment within 72 hours, Jinx will send Roland and Nolan after them. When he leaves the mansion, Garfield is furious because he doesn't think it's fair of his father to show up after so many years of bringing him trouble. Saddened, Vic tries to explain to his son what really happened the night he was abandoned, but Garfield refuses to listen. With no other choice, Garfield begins to think of a strategy to invade the lactose farm and his father says it will be an easy task. In the morning, when he wakes up, John goes downstairs and calls Garfield and Odie for breakfast, but they don't show up. When he got to the kitchen, the man found the fridge door open and some food scattered on the floor. At this point, John begins to worry, because he knows that Garfield would never leave food to spoil on the floor. Desperate, he starts searching every corner of the house and panics when he realizes that his best friends aren't home. Meanwhile, Garfield and Odie try to figure out how to hitch a ride on the freight train that's on its way to the farm, and Vic uses a tree branch to throw his son into the wagon. Then he and Odie get into the vehicle and Vic takes the opportunity to try to get closer to his son. However, Garfield is not at all interested in finding out more about his father's life. While they argue, Odie works to set up a comfortable corner so that he and his friend can rest until they reach their final destination. A few hours later, the trio finally arrive at Lactose Farm, but contrary to what Vic remembers, the place has become a huge success. As well as being busy and full of people, the farm has become a tourist attraction, so it's almost impossible to enter without being seen. While thinking of a strategy to go ahead with the plan, Garfield spots Otto, the farm's mascot, and realizes that he is very sad. So the cat decides to use his diplomatic side to approach the bull without arousing suspicion, in an attempt to find out how to get through those walls. However, the bull is so saddened that he doesn't pay any attention to what he has to say, and, after seeing Ethel leaving the barn, Otto gives a small smile. Apparently, he misses his girlfriend very much, but for some reason he can't join her. When he realizes the deep sadness that has overtaken the bull, Odie is devastated and decides to join him for company. Heartbroken, Otto tells him that it's been a few years since he was kicked off the Lactose Farm and separated from his beloved. The bull reveals that he has already tried to break into the farm to free Ethel, but has been caught every time. At that moment, Vic finds the perfect opportunity to get Otto's help to invade the farm and promises that he will free Ethel. Upon hearing this, the bull doesn't think twice before joining the team and sets up an escape route so that they can get away safely. As soon as they enter the factory, the trio must go straight to the power room and enter the pipes. After going through the labyrinth formed by the tubes, they will reach the refrigerator and need to hang on to the bars to reach the loading zone. Finally, they must get the key to the milk truck and drive to the west side of the farm to free Ethel. After getting the cow into the vehicle, the team must flee far away, but if the plan goes wrong, they all run the risk of being arrested. Meanwhile, John is still trying to get in touch with a professional who can help him recover his lost pets. That afternoon, while waiting for the right moment to carry out the first stage of his plan, Otto takes the opportunity to train his team to overcome the challenges that lie ahead. While Odie rests, Vic and Garfield go through really tough tests and have to withstand all the bull's attacks to prove that they are able to go ahead with the plan. However, this strategy only serves to cause even more misunderstandings between father and son, as Garfield still blames Vic for being in that situation. In an attempt to help them make up, Odie uses a vine to tie them around the trunk of a tree. But this isn't enough to bring them back together, and they end up hurting each other trying to escape. After several minutes of discussion, Vic finally finds a chance to explain himself and tells the truth about what happened the night Garfield and John met. The feline loved his son deeply, and seeing him hungry cut his heart out. Restaurant owners didn't like to see street cats rummaging through their garbage, so Vic had to leave his son in that alley to go out and look for food to feed him. However, when he returned to give the little fish he had found to his son, Vic saw him in the company of John and was happy to know that his son would have the chance to live in a safe and warm home, where he wouldn't have to go hungry. Despite the pain he felt at having to see him go, Vic never regretted his decision, because he knew it was the best chance Garfield would ever have of a better life. When asked why he never went to visit his son, Vic reveals that he went to John's house several times, but when he saw that Garfield was happy with his new life, he decided to stay away for good. When he realizes that father and son have finally come to an understanding, Odie decides to let them go, and neither of them realizes that they are being watched very closely. A few hours before the trio invade the farm, Roland and Nolan return to the mansion to warn Jinx about the progress of the plan, and the cat decides to make a phone call. Determined to warn the police about the invasion, the woman leaves a message, and Margie, the local police chief, uses a cat translator to understand what the feline is saying. After receiving the complaint, the woman prepares to take action. The next morning, just before starting the plan, Otto hands out some nuts to the members of his team and says that they will serve as communicators. Minutes later, when a school truck approaches, the invaders hitch a ride with the children to enter the farm unnoticed. As they are hidden inside the backpacks, Margie can't detect them through the security cameras. Through the communicators, Garfield and the rest of the team receive Otto's coordinates to find the power room and manage to enter unnoticed. After locating the ventilation duct at the end of the corridor, the trio are surprised by the arrival of employees and have to hide. In an attempt to throw them off, Vic dresses up as a cleaner and manages to maintain the disguise until the employees leave. The trio then enters the pipe and slides down the tunnels until they reach a room full of machines. At that moment, Otto realizes that they have ended up in the factory, and Garfield ends up being caught on the security cameras. While Vic and Odie are safe in the employees section, Garfield ends up in the middle of the factory and is sent to the cheese grater. Seeing his friend in danger, Odie quickly goes after him and the feline manages to save himself by jumping onto a cheese conveyor belt. However, at the end of the conveyor belt, the pair end up separating once again and Garfield is sent to the fondue department. When he was about to fall into a pool of boiling cheese, Odie managed to save him, but this time the dog was almost sliced up along with his best friend. Seeing his team in danger, Vic decides to take action and goes after them. After saving them from imminent elimination, the street cat and his friends head for the loading zone. But then they run into a new problem. The board where the keys should be hanging is empty. This happened because Margie managed to get to the place before them and grabbed all the keys to stop the robbery. When the policewoman appears, Garfield uses a wheelchair to try to knock her down, but the woman dodges the attack and even manages to handcuff the feline's feet. Realizing that Margie is a threat, Vic and Odie try to escape, but the policewoman keeps trying to catch them. With Otto's help, Garfield thinks of a plan to escape and attacks the woman with a mop. Furious, the woman goes after the orange cat and uses a stun gun to electrocute it. During the attack, Margie hears the security alarm going off and, through the security cameras, she sees the bull trying to break into the farm. When he realizes that the men are on their way, Vic decides to betray his son and throws Garfield and Otto at the policewoman. In this way, the traitor manages to steal the key to the truck and gets into the vehicle while the other members of his team are trapped with Margie. As he flees with the truck, Vic opens a passage in the electric fence and Otto finally manages to get close to Ethel. However, before the couple could escape together, Margie showed up with a team of security guards and separated the two. After being attacked, the bull has no choice but to flee and sees Odie and Garfield being captured by the men. Minutes later, while driving the cargo truck, Vic comes across Roland and Nolan on the road and has to brake the vehicle. Soon after, Jinx shows up and Vic hands her the milk truck, hoping to pay off his debt. At that moment, the feline discovers that he has been tricked, because the truth is that the cat wanted him to be taken to the animal shelter and spend the last days of his life locked up there. After being abandoned by his father for the second time, Garfield begins to feel useless, as he shouldn't have given him another vote of confidence. However, when he arrives at the cattery, the feline meets the former members of his father's gang and discovers that Vic was expelled because he went out during the robberies to see his son. According to those cats, every Sunday evening Vic went to visit the kitten to see how it was doing and he did this religiously. Even listening to the reports of those unknown cats, Garfield still doesn't believe the story and is about to give up hope when Odie shows up. Surprised, the feline asks his old friend to help him escape, but John soon arrives on the scene. The man is exhausted, having spent the last 2 sleepless nights looking for his pets. That day, by coincidence, he decided to search the city's shelters and finally managed to find them. Upon returning home, Garfield celebrates having his life back and enjoys all the comforts his house has to offer. To celebrate the return of his companions, John prepares several trays of lasagna and allows them to eat as much as they want. However, before he devours the first piece of his favorite food, Garfield looks towards the window and remembers his father telling him that he always went to visit him during dinner. At that moment, the feline gets up from the table and decides to leave the house to check if Vic is around. He is so anxious to find his father that he almost gets run over crossing the road. However, when he climbs the branches of the tree where Vic said he used to stay, Garfield doesn't find him and is disappointed once again. However, when he looks up, the cat sees several marks left by his father, who scratched the trunk every time he went to visit him. When he realizes that Vic was telling the truth, Garfield immediately climbs down from the tree and decides to go after him. While trying to understand why Vic abandoned them, Garfield realizes that it was only part of his plan, as his father knew that Jinx wouldn't let them go so easily. The feline also knew that if Garfield and Odie were taken to the shelter, John could easily find them and they could return home. However, if this theory is correct, his father is in danger, so Garfield decides to go out and look for him. In the company of his faithful squire, the feline returns to the abandoned mansion and, once again, John loses his pets. He was preparing a housewarming present for Garfield and intended to surprise him with a volcano cake, but his plans didn't go according to plan. When they arrive at the mansion, the two friends go out to look for Jinx, but find no one there. While searching the place, they come across a board full of photos and discover that the cat intends to throw Vic off a bridge. Desperate, Garfield decides to contact Otto through the communicator and says that he still intends to fulfill the agreement they made, but first, he will need his help. At that moment, Jinx and her henchmen are with Vic on a freight train and are slowly approaching the bridge where the cat intends to throw him. What the villain doesn't realize is that Odie and his friends are preparing to rescue Vic and, once again, Garfield is thrown into the moving train. After knocking Jinx down, the feline runs to free his father, but fails to cut the rope. Furious, the cat grabs an axe to try to hit him, but ends up freeing Vic during the attack. Father and son quickly slide down the side of the vehicle until they reach the other carriage, but after climbing onto the roof, they end up being surrounded by Roland and Nolan. Just then, dozens of drones appear carrying pizza boxes and Garfield uses the snacks to attack his enemies. When the train arrives near where Odie is, Roland attacks Vic and Garfield decides to throw pepper in the big man's eyes to help his father escape. To get rid of the gang once and for all, Garfield devours an entire jar of chili sauce and uses his flaming breath against Jinx and her henchmen. After making their way to the last wagon, father and son hang from a branch and, just as he was about to be caught, Garfield pushes his father off the bridge. Knowing that there's a net below waiting for them, the orange cat jumps right in, but both he and Vic end up being thrown back up. This time, they are captured and Garfield asks his father for forgiveness for not having been able to save him. At that moment, facing elimination, the pair show that they are closer than ever, and when Roland and Nolan realize this, they are moved. Thrilled by the scene, they refuse to continue following their boss's orders, so Jinx decides to push them all off the cliff. After getting her revenge, the feline celebrates joyfully, but doesn't notice the metal bar that's in her way and ends up being knocked off the moving train. During the fall, Roland grabs the trio in midair and uses his hairy body as a parachute. However, he can't glide for long and the group ends up being saved by Otto. On the way to the hammock, they come across Jinx in free fall and the cat is also rescued. After saving his father, Garfield decides to help Otto free his girlfriend. To do so, he contacts Margie and uses a cat translator to pass himself off as a human. He then arranges to meet the woman and gets Ethel's freedom in exchange for Jinx. As a good policewoman, Margie is capable of doing anything to catch criminals, so when she learned of the cat's cruelties, the woman readily accepted the exchange. After several years separated by a fence, Ethel and Otto finally met and were able to continue their romance. The next morning, Odie and his friend return home and Garfield says goodbye to his father. When John sees his pets coming through the door, he runs to hug them and is relieved to know that they are all right. A few minutes later, Garfield decides to go after his father and manages to convince him to come in and meet his owner. That day, John decides to adopt him and Vic becomes the newest member of the family. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notification so you can watch more videos like this.